All you, buddy.
Cool. All right. Here we are in episode 1 of True Politics. Andy Silva, Gerald Xavier, talking about the issues that shape our world. And today, our question is, should we redistribute wealth from the rich to the poor, from the wealthy to the destitute? Andy Silva, what do you think?
Well, I think the first thing we should talk about is, it's a question that's been brought up for a long time, and you have Soviet Russia, right, was started because of that. Like, that is the main thing behind Marxism, communism, and all that. So it's been something that's been prevalent throughout the 20th century up till now. But the real question behind it is it's literally, at our doorstep, I guess, as we speak. Everyone received a $1,200 check in April, just because, hey, everyone needs money because you're not working. So kind of that UBI idea that Andrew Yang was bringing up in the debates initially, that actually happened. And UBI, it's one of those great ideas that everyone, oh yeah, I don't have to do anything and I get a $1,000 check. But it's like, that money comes from somewhere. That money's probably coming from, I would guess, a wealthy person that owns some type of amazing business. You could envision the people who exist now that we'd be getting the money from. But really, I think, and a lot of the debates just delve into kind of some ridiculous, like, hyperbole from a lot of people, from those that are anti-wealth distribution. It's, oh, you're just some lazy bum that doesn't want to do anything and live off those who are, who are more successful than you. And from those who are pro wealth distribution, it's, oh, you're just a nasty wealthy person. You don't care about anybody. You don't care about the betterment of your fellow man and all things of that nature. And really, I think it's a little more nuanced than that. And you really only hear from maybe a really wealthy person about why they don't want to do it, or kind of a weirdo, destitute perhaps is the word you use, a weirdo, not wealthy person who's like, okay, these are probably not the best representations of either side of this argument. So with that being said, Gerald, I would like to say, where do you stand on the issue in general? We'll dive into more details as we get on, obviously, but where do you stand in general on the topic? Yes or no? Should we redistribute wealth?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you say so?
And here's why. I would say that because redistribution of wealth happens historically and it's either violent or nonviolent. So to me, it's not even a question of we should or should not do it. It's just a reality. Like, redistribution of wealth just happens. And the question is, does it happen by people cooperating? And does it happen with people not cooperating? Obviously, it's a difference between force, using violence, and on the other side, it's a question of using politics, which is, influence, sort of. It's a different kind of force, more so political persuasion. But at the end of the day, one way or another, it's got to happen, because going back to what you were saying about Marx, what he actually wrote was that, like, the reason why communism will come to exist is because the proletariat, the working class, will eventually catch wind of what's going on with the bourgeoisie, which is the owning class, and fight back. And that's one way of wealth getting redistributed. The other way is where, obviously, the government figures out, okay, how do we take from the rich and give to the poor? Which, by the way, I'm not a fan of. Like, when I say yes, I'm not like, all right,
Yeah.
But I am open to certainly better solutions if it's UBI or lines than what we've had so far. So I'd ask you sort of the same question. do you think so? And whatever your answer, why and what do you think redistribution of wealth, if at
Sorry, broke up there. Can you ask the question again?
what you think in terms of yes or no, should we do it?
Mm-hmm.
Off of or what? How should we handle it?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, I mean, the simple answer to should we do it is yes. I mean, but I kind of want to maybe put an asterisk next to that. Like, I don't think. I think what it really comes down to is if you want to like, okay, let's back up a second here. And really what that question comes down to is like the redistribution of wealth. There's two sides to that. There's the people who want the money to come their way. There's the people that would send the money their way, right? Like, so let's just say there's two of us. There's me and you, and I have the wealth and you don't. And so the question is like, you're struggling to get by and pay your bills, take care of your kid, whatever it is. And I have like, I mean, more money than, I mean, I could sit there and not work for the rest of my life for the next 50 years and I'm fine. So yes, I think from my perspective, like I need to take a look at myself and be like, all right, can I help this guy out? Like, hey, Gerald, I heard I heard you can't buy groceries this month. Like, let me cover that for you, bud. Like, I got it. So, and from your perspective, you need to say, okay, thank you for that. Thank you for helping me out here. Help me get back on my feet. I now need to take some responsibility for myself and find a way to not need this. And so while I do agree that there should be some redistribution of wealth because of, I guess, essentially kindness and morality in someone's heart, which is fairly idealistic. I understand that there are those with a ton of money that are probably soulless pieces of shit, but where's it, I mean, like, where's it coming? Like, why are we getting this wealth? Like, are we getting it by giving it to someone because we care about them? And if you're the one receiving the money, are you understanding that this is a gift? Like, someone doesn't have to give you this money. Are you now using it as a chance to better yourself and get off of the gravy train, so to speak? I mean, that's where my issue with it comes in. And so then when you say how to do it, I would say that perhaps preaching, I mean, again, a fairly idealistic take, I get it, but like preaching amongst your fellow man that like giving and being kind and looking out for one another is the best way to go. Using, the U.S. government, literally taking the money by force and trusting that group is going to send it the right direction. I mean, I just think that's like, we can get into why I think that's terrible, but I mean, that's just not going to work. I guess I would say to most people who are pro wealth redistribution through the government, let's just say I would assume without ever taking a poll or anything, most of them fall on the left side of the spectrum, correct? Like Democrat, socialist, whatever, the non-Republican side, right? So I would ask any of those people, I mean, if you want to say federal government, and let's just go all the way up the chain to, the head of the snake, do you trust Donald Trump to do what's best with your money? Yes or no? And it's like, again, no polls taken. I would assume they would say, hell no, I don't want that guy touching my money. So, okay, well, why? Because, he's a corrupt, he's a piece of shit, he's rude. What? Okay, cool. I'm not even going to necessarily disagree with you, but that guy's president of the United States. So, I mean, if that guy can be president, like, who's to say we're not going to get someone worse in there? So, take the force, take the ability to steal someone's money and be like, oh no, I know what I'm doing with it. I'm going to take Andrew's money and I'll give Gerald what I think he needs. He needs this much. And it's like, no, we're good. Like, it's, yeah, you need to have something. You need to help out your fellow man, but that we can cut out the middleman, so to speak, I think is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And just spread the message amongst ourselves of like, you gotta look out for one another. You gotta be fairly kind hearted, and you can't be expecting to hand out either.
So you would say that it's up to the individual's discretion to decide how much they want to redistribute, ideally.
Yeah, I'd say so. And again, I understand, like, I can see a fairly, I don't know, I want to call it an easy counter argument to that being like, well, that's not fair because then they can just, they'll never pick enough or something like that. And I get it, but I mean, what, and like, okay, so I'll just ask you, Gerald, and like I said, I agree with you to most extent. Like, how much money of, let's use Jeff Bezos, wealthiest guy in the country, in the world, I guess, the wealthiest guy in the country. How much of his wealth does the rest of the population deserve? Like, what's the correct number? At some point, there's too much. At some point, there's too little, I guess. But like, how much do we deserve of his wealth? 30%, 90%,
Yeah.
5%? Like, it's a very arbitrary number. So if we can't actually mathematically come up with, nope, this is the amount we need, then it's probably just because we're just trying to, like, I don't know, make something up essentially. So it doesn't really, it just doesn't make sense to me that, like, why someone else deserves someone else's money or wealth, however you want to phrase that.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you bring up Jeff Bezos, which, like, obviously he's the world's richest, and still I think so. He's kind of has a target on his back in the sense of people looking at wealth inequality.
Mm-hmm.
There's this meme I saw on Instagram where he talks about his net worth, and then he talks about the and the
Hey, Gerald.
100 billion.
Gerald, hold up.
That's
You're
right?
like,
Like the
you're not coming through at all, man.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
Let me pause it for a second. Go.
So it's interesting that you bring up Jeff Bezos, because there's a meme I saw recently where he basically talked about his personal wealth and the wealth that Amazon has created and the difference between the two. And one of the things that a lot of people, I think, when we have the conversation of wealth redistribution, people don't consider the fact that while Jeff Bezos has accumulated something like $130 billion, he's actually created more wealth for other people, other investors in Amazon, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. So in a weird way, the ability to own and to have a piece of Jeff Bezos's wealth is available to you. Mm-hmm. It's on the stock market, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not necessarily wealth redistribution, but it is the ability to obtain wealth based on the value created by another person, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I don't know, like you said, it's really arbitrary. Like, if I go up to Jeff Bezos and I say, you should give back, or there be a mandatory percentage. Yes, what taxes are, right? And I don't know that, I don't know that the arguing for wealth redistribution and the specifics of it are really thinking about how and maybe other ways that people who are not nearly as wealthy as somebody like Jeff Bezos, say, could participate in that and actually get a slice of the pie. Because like the thing about somebody like Jeff Bezos or any other entrepreneur is they're actually slice of the American economy bigger. Like, they're actually taking the pie and they're making it bigger by creating a company that is valuable, right? Like, that actually creates value for other people, for investors, etc. So the thing about the wealth disparity that to trigger people is also, ironically, the thing that is making, for instance, the United States a better place to live than a lot of other, because we have these incentives for businesses to come here to create that value and to expand.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the I don't know what the solution for people who, because I think what it comes down to is a lot of people who are looking for, I mean, what you said about the right and left is a good example of like two different incentives. One group, for instance, is regularly, more usually looking for more taxes of the rich so that we can give to the poor. And then the other group, of course, is looking for less taxes to the rich so that we can incentivize businesses to go full steam ahead, and basically allow the private sector to serve the needs of the poor, of mass markets, right? So obviously, unmetered, unregulated free markets can create that huge wealth disparity that becomes an issue because, like we said, throughout history, that wealth disparity becoming too big is a really bad, a bad thing, right?
Yes.
That's like the French Revolution, right? When Marie Antoinette is like, let them eat bread, and the peasants are like, fuck this shit, I'm gonna storm the castle now, right?
Yeah.
So I think for us, it's like that's also a good example of the fact of human nature that like at a certain point there's a disconnect between the rich so great that granted not everyone is a soulless bastard like you said, but some people are, and are that it becomes an issue. Like obviously it did in history, but do you think that would be an issue in the future, right?
Well, I would say like when you said like, so the what's her name, Marie Antoinette, the let them eat cake chick.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the biggest my only like I think is a good criticism of using that as an example, because I mean, and you're not the only one that like says it, oh, eat the rich, all the rich say, all the rich are basically like the let them eat cake people. It's like Marie Antoinette was it was a monarchy, and called a dictatorship for argument's sake, like, but it was a monarchy, and they got their money by whatever and had no consequences to their actions, to whether it was rule of law or whatever, until people stormed the castle and started chopping people's heads off with the guillotine. So if you want to use like wealthy, businesses, and I guess the majority shareholders of said businesses as that example, I mean, Apple is probably the closest thing we have to like something like that, and we got an iPhone out of it. And you can sit there and be like, well, think of what you can do with an iPhone. I mean, you have if a peasant if we went back in a time machine to whenever the French Revolution was, I handed them an iPhone, those people are like, this guy's a fucking alien. Like, nope, he's an alien. He can talk to someone on the other side of an ocean. He can take a picture of himself and everyone else in the world sees it. Like, what? No, like they wouldn't understand the concept. So it's like, I think it kind of is a good example of, in that podcast, Joe Rogan podcast with Naval Ravikant, I believe his name is, when he says that like we have to stop viewing wealth as a zero-sum game. It's like, did Jeff Bezos and I don't know, Steve Jobs passed away a few years ago, but whoever the head of Apple is, Bill Gates with Microsoft, like, is them building their wealth, is their companies becoming what they come, have they pulled us up with it? And it's like, yes. I mean, maybe we started here and they went like this, but as they were going like this, we were coming up with them. So now, like, your ability to acquire knowledge is much easier. Your ability to communicate has become easier, which gives you more time to do other things. There's people that don't treat it correctly, which actually would kind of go with my wealth distribution. Like, the other side, the person receiving it has to treat it correctly. Like, how many people have something like an iPhone? And trust me, I'm one of these people, I'm sure. You could say I am. People get an iPhone and they're like, you have access to literally some of the any great information you can think of, and you're like, yeah, I follow the hot chick on Instagram, or I look at some doofus athlete's tweets about, oh, he's working out, he's going to be great this season. Like, I'm not saying don't do that stuff, but I mean, you could legitimately bet it. Like, I could sit on my phone 8 hours a day and legitimately better myself. And I think if I walk you anybody on earth that sits on their phone 8 hours a day, none of them are bettering themselves. So it's like, we still,
Yeah.
like, we were presented with a form of wealth. We were presented with a form of, like, if you want to call it wealth distribution, a wealthy person providing someone else something else for us. It's just not money, and we fuck it up all the time. Like, every day we fuck it up, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's the problem. The problem is we do receive it actually in the free market, not even via government. That's in the free market. We get it every day. We give them a little something, they give us something with way more value back. Hey, I gave you $800 for my iPhone. My iPhone is, to an individual, is worth way more than $800. Like, you can get way more out of that than
Oh yeah.
$800 cash. So it's like, give me the evidence that this money to these people is actually going to make everything better. Because it, as far as I can tell, it's not.
Sure. I mean, you could look at something like the recent stimulus package, right? And it's like, how much good is that $1,200 going to? And the answer is that, well, it comes down to how you use that $1,200. And similarly with your iPhone example, comes down to how you use your iPhone. And ultimately what it comes back down to is how are you using your time, right? How are you using your time? Are you using it to play the game of capitalism, recognizing the forces that are shaping your life right now? Or are you playing the game of status and he said, she said, and going on Twitter to get triggered by, somebody who says an opinion that doesn't align with yours? Like, there's definitely a lot of wasted money. And then there are those people who can benefit from that $1,200 because they put it to good use.
For sure.
But I like what you said about, it is absolutely true that a good business, and I mean, like, I shouldn't even say a great business like Amazon or Apple, where you're talking about Google, for instance. I mean, how much smarter is the average individual, because you don't need to know anything. You can literally just Google it. Like, you have access to all the information in history ever with your fingertips, right?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about this is that when we talk about redistribution of wealth, we live in a different world from the time where these concepts were just sort of being introduced into American ideals, right? Like when the forefathers were writing the Constitution, obviously they had a lot of foresight for how people behave, where incentives are that get people to do and act in certain ways. But I don't know if you went back and talked to Thomas Jefferson or any of the founding fathers, if they would have predicted that we would live in a world like this, where each individual person is now a media company, where you can take a picture of yourself and push it out into the world. And you have a tool that is literally no less sending people to the moon, but now we have a tool that fits in our hand that is stronger than the computers that sent man to the moon, right? So crazy shit. Like you cannot, it's like Tiger King. You cannot make this shit up. So what do you do when you see that these companies who have created this wealth for people are also, in some circles, vehemently despised, right? Like, people, there are some circles that like vehemently despise Amazon and Apple and Google because they're evil corporate, and they can't possibly do any good. And it's interesting too, because like we talk about corruption in the government, obviously corruption in the corporate world exists, but it's like, at what point do we sort of mitigate that scorn with, I can call anyone in the, like, you have access to uh, infinite, like almost infinite resources because
Mhm.
of the things that these businesses have created and do offer. So it's
Mhm.
really interesting to ask that question. Like, at what point do you look at and it's both sides, right? It's on one hand, they can get runaway power and you have to mitigate monopolies, and you can't, like, you can't allow corporations to run rampant.
Mhm.
Maybe you would disagree though. I don't know, what your opinion is on this.
I would say that like when it comes to like you can't allow someone to run around. I mean, yeah, I agree. You can't let any like can't let anybody run rampant, whether it's the homeless guy in the corner or a billionaire
Yeah.
who flies around in a spaceship all day. Like, yeah, you can't let anyone run rampant. I think
Yeah.
what I guess what as I've come to like realize, I used to actually maybe right out of college, I like really empathize with someone being like, oh yeah, we need to take that guy shouldn't have that much money or whatever it is. And I'm like,
Sure.
oh, I get where you're coming from, but then I really think what bothers me the most about the incredibly like wealthy and the elites, if you will, wealthy and powerful, is the lack of like consequences. I think is what really bothers me. And so if someone told me like, hey, we're not going to tax a corporation ever, like they're not paying any taxes, but if you're an airline and you ran it poorly and you have no cash in reserve, and then we hit this crazy pandemic where no one wants to fly, well, guess what? It's your fault that your business went under. So you're not getting a dime out of us to bail you out because you did a shitty job. Just like I said, I don't think money should come down like by force. Should come down to people who, hey, I ran my personal life poorly and now I can't afford my mortgage. Someone needs to give me money to bail me out. No, just like you, wealthy guy, you fucked up, and well, 20,000 people are going to lose their jobs because, oh well, I guess you can live with that in your conscience. Like, and we can dive into that more and be like, okay, if Delta Airlines goes under tomorrow, like their planes don't disappear, the airports don't disappear. Like Jeff Bezos is probably going to come in and be like, yeah, I'll buy that, thanks, and turn it back into a successful airline, and we'll be able to fly again. And it's like,
Mhm.
but I really think we need to make it so the wealthy have, and not consequences like, oh, if you don't get it together, we're coming and, cutting your head off with a guillotine, so to speak. But like, there's consequences like your business can go under. You can do something incorrectly. Customers cannot buy your product or service, and your choices will matter to
Mhm.
customers, and then give the power back to the customer. Because right now, I mean, yeah, it's like in general, the customer still has power, but like the federal government, I mean, how much power does the customer, the taxpayer, really have? Like, they kind of just do whatever the hell they want, and they say a couple nice things to us, but they just kind of do whatever the hell they want. Blow up other countries. We'll tax these guys. We'll throw that guy in jail. Like, because they have no consequence. They really have no consequence. It's like we can't give them money. We can't give them the ability to continue to do these things. We can vote a guy out, but well, we've seen
Yeah.
that doesn't really do much. So I guess that's where I say when it comes like running rampant is I think the closer you get to free market, like the less that would be because the more there would be actual consequences. Like, hey, I'm Amazon, buy my stuff, and everyone's like, yeah, well, you don't do anything. I don't know, whatever the topic of the day is. You don't do anything for the environment, but Target does. So we're just going to buy stuff from Target. And then
Mhm.
Target takes off, and Jeff Bezos is like, well, fuck, hey, I installed
Yeah.
a bunch of nuclear power plants in the center of the country. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, he'll find a way to make sure he stays afloat by placating those who have the power. And right now, it's not us that have the power. It's not him either. It's the guys in DC and things of that nature. So he has to placate them, and they don't. I mean, I think we can kind of gather they don't really represent us that well. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I would say in terms of preventing someone from running rampant is create an environment where the people who don't want them to run rampant, us, are able to, give them consequences. Hey, we're not going to buy your product, or we're going to speak ill of you in the media, whatever it is, to prevent you from continuing to do this until you change. I think that's the best solution. I don't think we've really had a great, like, true free market example of it in our lifetimes. I mean, we don't exist in a free market, so yeah, I mean, we haven't a great example of it. But just conceptually, wouldn't you say it would probably be better to handle it that way than, let's just say, current state?
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like when you put it that way, sure, it sounds good. Like the incentives, at least the immediate incentives would. I mean, we know enough, I think, about a free market economy from just seeing how people act in our current economy,
Mm-hmm.
that uh, the incentives are better. They better serve economic growth than anything else. Than
Mm-hmm.
literally, I mean, that's why even in China, right? They adapted capitalism to their socialist system. They were like, oh, this capitalism thing really
Yeah.
works for growth, and then they adopt it, and then they kind of are. It looks like they're sort of changing now, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to say, like, and it's an interesting question because, like, I don't know if a complete free market system would create a situation where redistribution of wealth doesn't happen frequently enough or in great enough degrees that it keeps from revolution or a revolt of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. That's the thing that I think in the long term I could see happening in a purely free market where one group is adhering to. I mean, Amazon is a great example. Like, they continue to adhere to what customers want, basically take over every industry because they are just executing better than any other company.
Mm-hmm.
So they get more and more, power. The difference is Amazon is a unique company because the issue with monopolies in general is when they take advantage of their employees and/or they take advantage of customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes unmitigated. In
Mm-hmm.
Amazon's case, the entire foundation of that company is based on the ability to give more value to the customer.
Yes.
And the philosophy of Jeff Bezos is that customer interests and shareholder interests are aligned over the long term. So it's like what's good for customers is good for shareholders, is good for Amazon.
Yeah.
And so it chugs along and continues to basically destroy everybody who it competes with. That said, in another 100 years, what does the corporate environment look like if Amazon is like, and I don't know where at a certain point where like antitrust and anti-monopoly laws come into play to mitigate free market economics. But I could imagine a world where even if it's not Amazon, another company is able. It basically, companies in general, let's say like the corporate elite, not just one company, but a slew of companies are basically the holders of all the wealth, which is what's happening right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Larger and larger divide. And then if there was nobody, like the government, I don't know, maybe corporate boards would be elected to redistribute wealth to, like, in the private sector. I don't know, but I could see how that might create an issue for a situation where people could get shafted. People could get find themselves in that situation.
People get shafted. I would say, yeah, people get shafted regardless of,
everybody's getting shafted.
Class. People get shafted all the time on something, and that's just kind of the nature of humans, I would say, like whether you have, I mean, look at it this way: if you get shafted because it's the nature of humans, and we're all humans, you know, I guess. I mean, I don't see how else I can say it. We're all humans, right? So it's like then you're going to give humans. All right, here, let me back up a little bit. You kind of mentioned something about antitrust laws, monopoly type stuff. Like, hey, Amazon. I mean, Amazon is probably the closest thing. I mean, other than like Microsoft and Apple, like those three companies, I'd say right there are the closest things we have to monopolies in our life, in our country. Like the big three we read about growing up. Was it U.S. Steel, Vanderbilt's Railroad Company, and then Standard Oil, right? But it's like, okay, so let's just say you are, I don't think you necessarily are, but, kind of conceptually you're against it. Like no, can't have monopolies. We cannot have monopolies. Just can't happen. Like, because it's bad, it corrupts people, it does this. So then should we have an entity, which in order to redistribute wealth, not necessarily by without, other than by the kindness of someone's heart, to redistribute this wealth, you need to have a body in charge of it, right? Like these guys are in charge of determining where this money goes and who gets it and how we divide it up and all that. So the federal government is our current iteration of that. Like they have a monopoly. Those guys are a monopoly. They are a monopoly on power. They are a monopoly. Like they decide what happens because essentially they are in charge of the military. So like they are the ones that decide what happens. So to me, it's like if you're against the monopoly of like, hey, you can't be the biggest supply chain person ever. Like I can't have you being the only one that determines if I get my package second day air. It's like you're going to be okay with someone having the monopoly on the determination if they can drop a nuclear bomb on a place like that. And so I guess where I get at is that is what comes from creating a body that has the force and power to redistribute the wealth that way. Like just saying like, yep, we're taking 30% of your money and we're going to give everyone $1,200 a month, whatever it is. To have that type of ability, you have to have a monopoly on power. And that is not good. Like at all. We have a lot of historical examples of governments and individuals having monopolies on power, and it doesn't ever end with everyone being like, hey, this works out great. It ends with people, storming the castle or a world war or, literally the government falling and just becoming a non-entity. So it's like that to me is what I worry about when people want to redistribute wealth and like are anti-monopoly in the private sector. It's like, no, you're anti-monopoly in the private sector, but you're okay with the monopoly in like the public sector. Like anti-monopoly, you just don't like how much money that guy has. I don't like how much money that guy has either. I'm very, 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 very envious of billionaires. Would love to have the wealth they have, but that doesn't mean like I think. That doesn't mean I think I actually deserve it. Yeah, I would like it, but I don't deserve it, and I certainly don't think there should be something out there that can just be like, oh yeah, I'll take some of that for you because you don't want that gun pointed back at you at some point. So I think that's kind of where like you and I differ on it is that's the lens I view being like I guess opposed to how we want wealth to be distributed is the entity we would need to do it by, I guess we'll say by force, by not allowing people to choose. It'd be almost like we'd be creating a monster, like which we have the monster currently, but like we'd be creating a monster. So that's, I guess, because you just mentioned antitrust, and I kind of wanted to bring it up. Like, if you're antitrust, theoretically, you should be anti-government because they do have a monopoly. It just isn't on a service; it's just on power.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't think anyone is. Or let me back up. I'm not antitrust or anti-monopoly because I don't like monopolies or anything like that. The reason why is because history shows that when the divide in wealth becomes too great, that violence happens, right? So it's almost like the inevitable is that if that's true, if the unmitigated capitalism results in two very, very separate classes, like where basically a middle class no longer exists because there's just the haves and the have-nots, and everybody gets squeezed out to either side based on your productivity, based on your leverage, right? Based on the value you create on both of those spectrums, then you've obviously got a societal problem. So it's not even a question of a billionaire giving to an individual. It's that it's a bunch of billionaires and a bunch of individuals with nothing who then it's like, okay, we could agree that, or would you agree that we then have a problem if the have-nots decide, all right, we're screwed. You know, we have nothing. And it's like I agree with you on the point of the better way is if the disparity doesn't happen because the wealthy give to the poor when it's needed as a gift, as a means of helping their fellow man. Then the poor recognize, I can do more with this money. Let's say it's a stimulus package of $1,200. I can do more with this money than just whatever, buy groceries. Maybe some people can, maybe they can't, right? Buy groceries, buy in one case, let's say somebody says, oh, I can buy an iPhone, which I can then use to make calls to people, where I can sell something, or I can get online and start a Instagram or a podcast where I sell whatever it is, candles, burlap sacks, anything under the sun, right? I can do that now. The issue is, time and time again, what happens is, and I think this is where the big divide between the two groups happens, is the people who are in the haves, the people who really make it, are the people who at some point or another, and I'm excluding like the trust fund babies who sort of just grow up and don't need to, almost like parasitic capitalism, where it's just like, oh, I just, you know, I'm talking about like the people who actually ascended into that level of wealth through value creation. Somebody like Jeff Bezos, right? Somebody who, like, I think fairly middle class, like was flipping burgers at McDonald's when he was 16 to, you know, obviously becoming the world's richest man. So somebody like that says, okay, like I give this to the have-nots, and then the have-nots, the majority of the time throughout history, don't know how to make use of that, or they don't make use of it to the point where they are able to ascend into at least a reasonable state of wealth, of having enough resources to comfortably survive. So then it becomes an issue of, all right, well, if they can't handle that, then what do we do? Do we give them a universal basic income? If so, who do we appoint to distribute that, to give them that? Like, what do we, you know what I mean? Like, for me, the question is more so like, what do we do if we know that these two parties essentially are not going to communicate, and, you know, history shows, okay, there's going to be some issues here if we don't find a way to meet these two so that nobody gets hurt. You know what I mean? So I don't know what the answer is that's better than some form of government, even if it's a less active, or I don't know what the word would be, but I think you understand what I'm getting at. It's like, I definitely don't agree that.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
No, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I think it's just a question of like I wouldn't say by any means that the government we have now is exactly right, and I think it does especially come into question that like at this point when you literally have the world at your fingertips, at this point, is it is it okay, or like I don't know what the right word is there, but it's like, dude, if you are at a point where you're not using your connection to the rest of humanity via the internet
Mm-hmm.
to learn and to either start a business or create some value for other people so that you can actually receive money, then it becomes an issue of like there is actually you know a redistribution of wealth happening, and it's happening through not the government but through the platforms like Facebook, like Apple with the iPhone, with the new media, with code, with all of these things that are at our fingertips. And I think that is like for anyone who's thinking, oh man, like I want a piece, I want a piece from the government. It's like, dude, like the government doesn't make any money. They don't have real money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you want a piece, take it from the people who are literally, it's their job. It's the premise of their company to give you this piece, and
Mm-hmm.
it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's
Mm-hmm.
Apple, it's all of these companies that you can actually you actually have leverage from Amazon. Like that's what these companies are actually giving you.
Mm-hmm. I think I kind of talking through this. I've kind of come with like I think I have my best argument for it and my best way to phrase it. I've been kind of dancing around it and haven't had a good way to say it. But like we talk about wealth redistribution and should it happen and this and that. I would say first of all, many people, and I think even you and I have done a good job of like explaining this. Like if we say what is wealth, wealth isn't like I make 100 grand a year or I make 10 grand a year. That's not wealth. That's like that's your income, and you can build your wealth based on your income and all that. I understand that, but like if you make 100 grand a year and you live in a really fancy apartment that you rent and have a really fancy car that you lease, or you make 50 grand a year, but someone, gave you a home with 10 acres of land, I guess, and it's yours and you don't pay anything on it. Like you're inherently more wealthy if you're the person with the 50 grand a year than the 100 grand a year, because you're like, you have something of value that's yours and can appreciate over time, or that you can kind of do whatever you want with it or something of that nature. So wealth is more than just money. So then by that, I would say that free market capitalism is the easiest way to redistribute wealth. And not just because, yes, oh, well, someone could just write a nice check for everybody or build a nice library or something. Like, yeah, they could do that. But like literally Apple is a redistribution of wealth. Like here, we got all this money, whatever, but we are giving you the iPhone. Microsoft gives you the personal computer. Amazon gives you the ability essentially to do all of your shopping via your phone. You have all this other time now to do whatever, to say like, I'm going to learn something or I'm going to go to the gym or whatever. And so the proof that redistribution of wealth shouldn't be done by force and shouldn't be required is because, like I said earlier, we fuck it up every day. Every day, just because it's going to be a check instead of an iPhone, or a check instead of, hey man, like give me $5 a month and I'll give you, like all those websites, I don't know, Skillshare or all those websites where you can learn something. Like give us $5 a month and you can learn to be a graphic designer today. And you have the time to do that because you don't got to go shopping, because you have Amazon at your fingertips, and you can do it from your couch because you have an iPhone. Like we have all of this stuff available to us already, and we don't take advantage of it. Some do and become Jeff Bezos or what insert wealthy person. Like some people do it, or they have a great talent and happen to use that to take advantage of it. But it's like every single one of us, and anyone that wants to be like, oh, well, what about how many people do you know that don't have access to a legitimate smartphone? I mean, I see, not to sound like cliche, I see homeless guys on the street with cell phones. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
okay, so everyone kind of has access to something. And yeah, you might be starting in a different plane. You might be starting way down here instead of way up here. And, I can empathize with that guy, but you've done nothing to try to get to that next rung. You just have expected someone else owes you it because you had bad circumstances. And it's like, they don't.
Mm.
And they're already providing something. Yeah, it requires something a little bit from you, but it's like, I mean, the value you get out of an iPhone for $800 is absurd, and it's like you're just wasting it on Twitter, tweeting about a Michael Jordan documentary, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But
I've heard.
Yeah, total side note. I know you don't like. You're not a real big sports guy, so do you know like
If it's MJ, it's a different story.
Yeah, Michael Jordan, that guy. If we need someone to take the United States to the next level and be the greatest country on earth, that guy needs to be our fucking president because he is ruthless. Nothing. China. You think China's gonna stand in our way? All he have to do is like whisper to him, said like, "Hey, China said you're kind of a bitch," and that country be gone. We'd own them by November. So it's like that guy. Love him. Anyway, but I guess that back to the original point, we are already receiving wealth distribution every day, just maybe not with cash, and we don't take advantage of it. So why should we do it even more? Because all it's going to do is just be people still not taking advantage of an even bigger piece of the pie, and those that are kind of doing the legwork, so to speak, whether you like to admit it or not, that the wealthy guy's doing the legwork or funding the legwork at least.
Yeah.
You're just disincentivizing him even more or penalizing this guy or woman even more for providing this. So it's like, once I start looking at all that stuff, and yeah, it's a little bit more broad concepts than like raw numbers for someone. I can get why they would disagree with what I had to say there. But once I start looking at it that way, I'm like, oh, like this isn't.
Well, yeah, that's a mindset thing too. Like I think for any individual, the better mindset to have is I'm in control. I'm not going to rely on the government. I'm not going to look to a third party to empower me to change my circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
The only way, and I mean, history shows this too. It's like the only way to acquire wealth, to acquire money, to raise your stakes in life is education, and then greater productivity based on that education. That's really, I mean, you can get, education gets you to a point where you have more leverage, where you have more skills that you can put to good use and pick yourself up. Like that's really and for people who, like, what I guess my question would then be like, for people who can't, because that's always the argument on the left, which is, it's a good argument. It's like, well, there are plenty of people who are incapable of whatever education, of
Improving themselves.
going to work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't have an answer for them other than like, what can you do? If nothing, then obviously like it's a question of, can you rely on friends and family? And I feel like the more beneficial discussion for anyone who listens to podcasts is not the 1 out of every 100 people or so on who like it can't work, or who just like for whatever reason like just it has allotted in life where they're just not able to. But it's much more useful to look at the people who, because there's the vast majority of people can work, can do things, can learn something new, can take advantage of the internet, of the community, of whatever it is, to create value, to share it, to spread. That's the thing that I think is the most, maybe one of the most important points that we brought up, is that when you are a company, when you value, you're not just creating value for yourself, you're creating it for other people. Like when you invent an iPhone or a network, other people can use that.
Mm-hmm.
They can make money on it.
Yeah. Like imagine, like let's just get like, and I mean, let's get abstract with it. Something that doesn't exist. But let's just kind of as a thought experiment. Like let's say
Widget.
I invented a car that runs on a battery that is charged by air. It just sucks air in and you drive, zero pollution. Once you have that battery in it, you never have to refill it. It's all free air, blah, 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 right? And I say I'm going to charge $20,000 a car for it. And I go out there and everyone on earth buys that car or leases it or whatever. And so I become worth $1 trillion. Like, I mean, what I provided the world was better than like writing everyone a $2,000 check, right? And I became the richest guy on earth. So it's like, I don't know. I think people need to view it more like that way. Like a lot of these people are making their life better. I mean, they might be assholes. They might be rich. They might have Donald Trump has a golden toilet. I mean, I wouldn't say he ever made anyone's life really better. He just made nice golf courses and hotels. But like people have like, Jeff Bezos might have his own private jet and fly wherever he wants and have, a giant bar in his plane that gives him whatever he wants. But it's like, has Amazon made your life better? It's like, yes, it has. It just has. So
Yeah.
Don't be upset with that guy. Be upset with the person that makes your life more difficult. Intentionally makes your life more difficult.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the last of my soapbox on it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I actually, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it up. And I'm just gonna, as we were talking about this, I was kind of thinking about something I was.
You want to stop recording?
No. I think we're still good. It was just something that I was writing earlier that we were really touching on throughout this, which is like, I think right now we're at a point where the politicians are they're really not incentivized to help the people at all. And you touched on that, which I agree. Like, I completely think that now really what the politicians are puppets for the corporations, which are actually the value creators and actually running things. Mm-hmm. And it's like a lot of people, you're in like one of a handful of groups. You're either watching the politicians duke it out, and you think that something good is going to come of that, which it won't. You're either looking at that, or you're looking at the corporate elite. And for me, it's like if you look at what you can do to actually not necessarily become a corporate elite, but move in that direction, mm-hmm. like move in the direction of actually having something, mm-hmm. you're going to be better off for it, right?
Yep, I agree.
That's really where maybe we could touch on that in the next episode. Like what are the options that we have for, for at least moving up, if you want to call it that. And I don't mean by status. I mean like an actual financial wealth.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
I just kind of wanted to, I'm going to stop recording because this is